I went to their office and part of me was like, am I going to get arrested when I walk through these doors?
So everyone, this is something a little bit different. I am clearly the Ableton Move premier YouTube channel with over 300 subscribers, but I've been experimenting with something called Move Everything recently, and I am here with Charles Vestal, who is the creator developer behind it. Charles, welcome. Thank you for having this chat with me. Before anything else, in your own words, how would you describe Move Everything?
Yeah, so Move Everything is a set of tools and software that sort of runs underneath the existing Move interface so that it unlocks additional instruments, additional tools, and additional workflows.
So when I refer to it as hacked firmware, would that be accurate or would that be me just painting it in a weird way?
It's interesting. It's in the sense that it's unofficial, right? And it's hacked in the sense of like the old school way of calling something hack. A bunch of things duct taped together, sort of using a way to access the Move that is official in that Ableton is cracked for us, and then we would be able to sort of get in and do everything on the device. It's not hacked in the sense that there's nothing illegal happening. We're not like decompiling anything. It's really all above board actual software running on your device, but outside of the normal channels.
Okay, perfect. Tell me, the features are moving around a lot. Every time I update it, every time I just dip into the Discord, which is like maybe a couple of times a week, there's a new release of just, hey, don't forget, there's also this feature here. What are the main, if you can, features that it currently has to explain to people at home, audio files? What are the main features, I guess, that you're proud of currently?
Yeah. So I think the main is there's this shadow UI of what I call slots, which sort of run alongside tracks and have synthesizers, audio effect, MIDI effect, sort of let you have additional sound sources on your device. And that's really kind of just like having, which is cool. And there's, I think, 30 something modules, plugins that have been created and ported by me and other people, from emulating old synthesizers to new branding, whatever things that are used the device. So that's one big chunk, is like getting more sounds of your device out of your device. But there's also workflow things, and there's a 30-second skip back, which is like the SP404. You have this sort of rolling buffer all the time. You can always sort of dump to disk the last things that were played, a quantized resampler. But I think the thing I'm most proud of is there's an on-device screen reader. So using some of Ableton's accessibility implementation that's already there to make it so that low vision users or blind users can use the device without a computer or anything and really just unlock everything move to in a way that they haven't been able to.
Yeah, that is actually something that I really thought was fantastic, that I saw how much you'd added these accessibility features, which is something that, you know, a lot of people doing what you're doing would chase the sort of easy wins that people are asking for, which is, how do I increase the track limit or whatever it is? So I think it's awesome that you managed to figure out a way to expand on it in ways that a lot of people maybe wouldn't initially. And I thought that was really impressive. So that's great that you've added these accessibility features.
Yeah, I mean, I think accessibility is always important. And also, the nice thing is Ableton has a lot of accessibility features on the Move already. They had this sort of screen reader support so that you could use a computer to see what was going on the Move. But it meant that people who wanted to use it were tied to their desktop, and being able to unlock those things. It's also, there's this sense of, yeah, there's this easy stuff or this hard stuff or this stuff that's flashy or whatever. And like, back to it being a hack, like it's also just a collection of experiments, right? It's not a product. It's not the company making it. It's me saying, and other people saying what works and what might not work and what could we try. And it's all built on open source platforms and this other project with anything that came before it. Like there's all these things that are interconnected where it's really what can happen and unlock just the new things that we discover along the way.
I love that. That's the sort of thing that stuck with me, which was like, obviously the Move specifically has been kind of like tried to reduce like menu diving and stuff like that for people, and is very, very simplistic in its kind of workflow. And one of the things that I think the Move team have said is like, you know, we're not going to add on extra 4 tracks or anything like that. Like, we're trying to keep it clean. Obviously, you're adding a lot of features. How do you feel about this sort of idea that it could be like cluttering the workflow a little bit, or do you see it more as like just adding extra bonus features to people who may be interested in it?
Yeah, I think it definitely can clutter, right? Like part of what I'm trying to do is not change what Move is, right? There's the way that this was made possible is basically the Move runs a Raspberry Pi, a little Linux computer inside. And so you can basically do whatever you wanted to once we sort of had access to it. And so theoretically, you could add 8 tracks, 16 tracks, 1,000 steps, like whatever you want. You could build an entirely new system, but we get so much for free from the great work that Ableton has already done of the sequencer and the clips, the automation and all this stuff, that as much as we can use that and not reinvent it, it's better. And so I'm trying to only make the Move able to do more, not change what it does. But because of that, I'm also not digging deep into the hooks and really integrating as deeply as you might if you were actually developing one system, right? Like I describe it a lot like it's like you have an external synthesizer that's inside your Move, right? Like it's this extra thing that you can connect to, but it's not really part of the system. It's just connected to it. And that's where there is this sort of menu diving. You have to access this other layer, but it means that you're not cluttering up the main UI because you can use Move as you would today without anything really changing is the idea. Whatever you want to get to, you can.
And yeah, absolutely. I think that's for me the best thing about it is that it is completely optional, even when you're using it. What like I mean, I want to be clear to everyone. Like I'm a lapsed musician. I only started this channel like about a month ago after like 10 years of not even opening Ableton. So for me, I love the simplicity of the Move, but the fact that the shadow UI is, as you call it, even as you're using it, if you're just like, actually, no, I just really want this sound that already exists on the Move, you can just use that. And it just works. It's like you said, it's like an added plugin kind of thing that you're like, oh, I don't want to use that plugin for this track. So you don't have to. And it just, works as normal. That's the best thing about it. Because sometimes I've seen a couple of people in the comments that are like, oh my God, it's adding this extra layer of complexity. And it's like, yeah, it is slightly more complexity, but it's only there if you want it. If you don't want that complexity, you don't have to have it, right?
No, just I have sort of an unwritten rule that I'm trying, if there's something that the Move already does, like I really try hard not to get in the way of it. I don't want to replace it, right? It all needs to be on the side, not take over your regular workflow.
What was it that made you start the project? What was this sort of genesis of like, was it, I just want to prove that it can be done because it's a Raspberry Pi? Or was it more like if Move had these extra things, then it would be so much better? Like what was this sort of genesis?
I think there's like a mix, right? When it got the Move and it first came out, I knew it had a Raspberry Pi, and we figured out there's a group of people on this like hackers Discord that we had been talking about stuff. Figured out we could get on there. We started first just like poking around and seeing what was there and saying, okay, this is a computer, right? What can we do on there? And there was a project that I did last year called Extending Move, which was like a series of web tools that ran on the Move that you could make presets and do some slicing and stuff before they had slicing. But that sort of sat around for a while until this project Move Anything that this guy, Bobby Digitalis, I don't know his real name, that's the internet, started, that he figured out the technique to really have Move run other programs instead of the pads and knobs and stuff. And so we had a few things that were sort of additional modes. So instead of being on top of Move, it was like kill Move entirely, and then it can be this. Kill Move entirely, and then it can be that. But what started it for me was like, I like playing on my Move, and I like samplers and that sort of stuff. And one thing that I always wish that Move had was looping samples in the sampler, so you could have extended sustain. This was just one shot. And so the first thing I did was made a SoundFont player, which is like this old format from the 90s that you have all these general MIDI sounds and stuff, because it's something that exists and it was well documented. There's already open source projects that use it, so you could get it on there. And I think within a day or two, it was making new sounds. And then it was, okay, what can we do next? How far can we push like these new sounds? What can we load? What are the limits of the system? How do we make it all feel like a cohesive project and just go from there? But like what started it is, the door was left cracked open and I like poking around in things with it.
You kicked it down. Just with the SoundFont player, I've actually just started playing around with that. For me, like, not to get onto like a whole other tangent of like open source software, but in coming back to music for me, I was using Ableton like 20 years ago.
Mm.
And coming back to music for me and opening up the VSTs that I paid for and some of them like not being compatible, or I've got to change it from 32-bit to 64-bit, or, you know, all this sort of proprietary like subscription kind of crap that comes with it. That was actually the most disheartening thing for me coming back to music, because I'm like, man, like I paid for this stuff and now I either can't install it, I have to reinstall it in this different way or whatever. And I started thinking about SoundFonts. So coming back to music, all I kind of wanted was, how do I just have my collection of sounds that I like in a format that's going to last forever? And then when I saw that you had a SoundFont player, I was like, great. What I'm going to do is all of the stuff that I've paid for, I'm going to sample it. I'm going to turn it into a SoundFont. So if I can use it on Move, I can use it on Ableton, I can use it on the next Bitwig, whatever it is, I can do that. So like, I love that that your mind was in that sort of place of just like, what can I do that like is going to enable people to continue to have that legacy from, you know, from their old, you know, SoundFonts that they have.
And honestly, like part of the reason why there's so many open source ports and everything is because they're there, right? They're there, they exist, and you can get it to the system, and there's not this legacy of licensing and all this stuff. It just, you can really make something evolve with the platform as it goes.
Exactly. And like, you know, I love open source software, and the older I get, the more I appreciate and want to encourage it more. Tell me, if you could, is your background in software development? Is this just like a fun side thing that you do and your main job is working in banking? Like what? Tell me a bit about that.
So I work in like the software industry. I'm not a developer, I'm a product manager. So I work with developers a lot, and I work in that area. I have written code for money, but not for a few decades. So it's been a while. Okay. I'm really clear about this, and I just want to be clear on here also that like almost everything in this project after the Move Anything baseline, all of the Move Everything stuff is done with Claude and Codex and like AI coding assistance, because I'm not a developer and I do not claim to be a developer. But because you have these open source projects and you have these coding assistants, you can say, here's this platform, here's what we know about this platform, here's this project, and can you bring this over in a way that works? I think my background is a lot on user needs and usability and like how things can fit together, and really like finding a solution when you have these tools. How do these tools help you get there? And I think that's where I've been able to say, okay, this exists, and we put these things on top of each other, then you can get somewhere. Yeah.
Right. So that was going to be, you know, my next question is sort of how did you make it? I guess is the term's vibe coding, right? Is that what this?
Yeah. Vibe coding, I think, is when you write code and you don't look at it, you just ship it. I do sometimes look at it, but I don't always. I met with some people at Ableton a few weeks ago, was just talking about the project with them just casually at lunch, and they were asking how some things worked, and I don't really know how that part works, actually. I know it works, but I don't actually know like the details of it. And that's also why like I want to be upfront with people about that. A, because some people don't like it, and that's totally cool. You don't have to use it. And B, like when I talk about the risks of it, it is risky to put something on a device that no one has actually looked at how it works, right? Like it's not doing anything nefarious, but also if something goes wrong, it's a lot harder to figure out what that problem might be. But
I guess for you, like you know enough about coding to be able to be like, okay, here's the building blocks and the modules, and if there's a number wrong here and there, you kind of know how to fix it, but you don't have the complete in-depth like knowledge of this is exactly how this does something kind of thing.
I think I'm able to understand the systems that everything would use, and here's how this module would work with this module and how you could connect those things, combined with a background in music and synthesizers and all that stuff, knowing how like audio systems work. I can wave my hands in the right way and orchestrate things a little bit, but I'm not actually sitting down and writing the code myself, correct?
Right. So I guess when it comes to like, you know, you're saying obviously it comes with some risk installing it on the Move. Like for people that have concerns about risk, because it's open source, I imagine that for normies, probably it's general, like if you're just worried about that, what would your advice to them be? But for people who do code and have that worry about risk, I imagine that your advice would be you can look at the code if you have any concerns about it.
There's different levels of risk that people are worried about. For the, is my device going to be bricked? The risk is very low. No one has bricked their device using this. Now,
right.
I have had to reset my device, right? Like I've gotten to a situation where I've made it so it can't boot all the way, but you can use, Ableton has an official method where you can basically reflash it back to factory and restore everything to how it comes out of the box. But obviously the risk there is you lose all your samples, you lose all your sets, right? So there's this risk of you might mess up your workflow, but you're not going to have a $450 doorstop. The risk of, is this code stealing my Wi-Fi password and sending it to some mafia somewhere, is not something I think you should worry about, but that's also why it's open source. And so if somebody wants to look, they totally can. If they're worried about how it works under the hood, or they're worried about power consumption or all this stuff, like it's all out there for sure. But for normal people using it, I think the risk is their workflow being disrupted much more than having anything catch on fire.
Right. I mean, just in terms of like, considering you're not a software developer, the amount of features and the amount of even just usability tweaks has been awesome. If you had told me you've been developing software for 20 years, I totally would have believed you, because it works, and it's actually surprisingly intuitive as well, just in terms of like once you shift your thinking a little bit. For me, as you probably, I know you've commented on some of my videos, maybe you've been pulling out your hair a little bit because I'm not using it in the most effective way. But for the most part, I can find what I need to quite easily, and I know the workflow to tweak it. So it feels as professional as any other, developed software for it. So that's really impressive. And in terms of like performance-wise, in my experience, there's been very little sort of like knock on CPU performance. There is a video that I'm bringing out where I'm using the Surge XT plugin, and I decided to try and do 3 of them, and it definitely feels a little bit tricky. But the fact that it works like multiple times, let alone 3 times, is still a pretty incredible achievement.
Thanks. And I do just want to say, I've seen a lot of comments on videos that are like, oh my God, Ableton isn't, this guy's done more in 2 months than Ableton has in a year. And like part of that is because I don't have to worry about performance, right? If you run this and your move slows down when you run 3 Surge XTs, well, I was asking for that. But if I bought a device and it slowed down when I ran a synth on 3 tracks, you would think the device is defective. So like I'm operating under completely different constraints that mean I can experiment and I can put stuff out that has different limitations that Ableton doesn't have to worry about. And that's no shade on them for their product development at all. Like they are making a product for everybody to use. I'm making a product for whatever 200 nerds want to install this firmware on their Move. and
I mean, it's kind of like criticizing Mercedes for making a car that drives 100 miles an hour when people are tweaking it, being like, well, I can make it drive 150 miles an hour. You know what I mean? Like they have they're doing it for the wider user base to make sure that it's rock solid, because that's their reputation. But for you, you're like, well, it doesn't really matter. I'm making something cool.
And it's not that I don't want it to, it does matter in that like I do some things to try and make sure that stuff keep battery low and keep CPU usage low so that it's not just running for 20 minutes and dying, but I don't have to consider a lot of the things that they do. Like Ableton has Move that also you can open your move sets in Note, and then you can open those in Live, right? So like they have this whole ecosystem that they're developing for, which is super powerful, but it means that everything you do on one platform has to work on all the other platforms. I'm sure if you use Move Everything stuff, it's stuck on Move unless you record it off, and that's okay if you're willing to accept that, but you can't do something on Move and then if you're able to do something on Move and have it not work everywhere else. And so that's like another constraint that like I have the luxury of not having to worry about, and they have other priorities that are totally valid for them to.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you've spoken to Ableton and they have heard about this, right? Tell me what you've heard, what they think about it.
Yeah, so I'm based in Berlin, and so is Ableton. When I did the Extending Move project last year, I talked about it on like the official Ableton Discord. Like we try to keep things separate just so we don't confuse normal Move users, but they knew about it, and I went and got lunch with them and have kept in touch. And then when this came out, met with them again and just to show them what I'm working on. I think they're curious and interested. And I think if I was like as a product manager myself, if I saw this sort of community and this sort of stuff, it's super interesting to understand what people are really like willing to put in the effort themselves to build even, right? Like it's super rich data. I think given, like I mentioned, all of their product priorities and stuff, I wouldn't necessarily see them opening up the platform in this way officially because it's just a lot of other stuff. But they're super nice people, and I went to their office, and part of me was like, am I going to get arrested when I walk through these doors? But it was they're like us, right? They like making music, they like the technology, they like talking about it, and it's super nice to just have that even casual relationship.
I love that. I also saw, is it Johannes on the Discord specifically giving you a shout out for the extended accessibility features as well. So that must have been pretty validating to see them kind of break their rule of like, we're not going to talk about other people's projects, but we're going to make an exception in this instance.
Yeah, I do think the accessibility stuff, like I said, it's important. And I also think it's really eye-opening to see people being able to use a device that weren't able to use it before, use it in a new way. And I think they see that too. And they can't support it officially. Like they're never going to be able to say this is part of the Ableton ecosystem, but I think they can point to things that people are doing and say, this is like a community effort that is really helping people that wasn't there before. And I think that's awesome that they can even acknowledge it. So
for you, I spoke to you about it. You said that the word plan may be a little bit loose, but what are your ideas / hopeful feelings about progressing Move Everything into the future?
Yeah, like I said, like right now it is really a lot of experiments that have been arranged in a way that feels very product-like. And I'm glad that you find it easy to use, but it still is not, there's parts that are clunky, things are built in 12 different ways in different spots. I think one plan would be to take a look back and say, okay, knowing what we know now after doing this for some time, how would we design this and construct this in a way that sort of takes into account the things we've learned along the way? So it's not really about aesthetics even, it's more just like the functionality and how we share things. So that's one thing is where I think building something that is more product feeling and more cohesive is a plan. There are some things within that too, where right now everything is very isolated. You have these like plugins and these tools, and they don't really talk to each other. How can we get this sort of workflow smoother so that you can bounce between tools and not be jumping back in and out all the time? And yeah, I think there's only a couple things that are left on my wish list of things, and then I think like it's in a solid place where really it's just iterating on usability and bugs and all that stuff to make it work better.
Right. I guess you're probably going to roll your eyes at this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I'm sure that you've probably had this question. And I guess it's technically happened, but my question is, how possible and / would it be in your potential plans, would it be to add an extra 4 tracks to turn it to the move from a 4-track into an 8-track?
So what we've done with Move Everything, right, is you can access the screen, you can access the audio, and you can access the MIDI, right? Which means that what we're doing is like basically anything we want, right? We could build an entirely new thing on top. What I personally don't find exciting is let's re-implement all of what clips are and all of what the sequencer is and all of what automation is to have this new thing that doesn't have 4 tracks, it has 8 tracks, right? So you could do that. It is technically possible to build a new system that has 8 tracks. There's nothing preventing you from doing that. But what you can't easily do is take everything that Move has today and just change the 4 to an 8, right? That's more than we have access to. And one thing we don't do in any of this, right? We're not actually hooking into the Move application that runs on the device and like taking it apart. We're basically using all the signals that it uses on the system of audio goes here, screen goes here, MIDI goes here, and like grabbing onto them on the way and redirecting them and doing stuff to it. We don't change Ableton's code. And that would be changing Ableton's code, which we shouldn't do for a bunch of reasons. One of them legal and one of them stability, but also just it's not really. I think that there's more you can do to push the workflow on Move, even with 4 tracks, than 4 more tracks to make it more exciting, usable, and all of that. To answer your question, yes, it's possible. No, I'm not planning on doing it.
Good. And to be honest, like, and maybe you've also found this as well, like, before I bought the Move, I was like, oh, if it just had 8 tracks, but I bought it anyway. But in using the Move, and especially now with Move Everything, I can see the beauty and the simplicity of 4 tracks, because it pushes creatively, it pushes your brain. And maybe you find this as a developer as well, where you're sort of like, the limitations are kind of its beauty, and it means that you have to think a little bit harder into like, how am I going to make this into something within these constraints? Like, it pushes you into a more creative place, right?
Yeah, and there's also there's always been weird workflow stuff with, especially with samplers, right? Like you look at the SP404 and like how people use it, like it's all about resampling, right? It's not like there's one track on 404, like it's not tracks. And one of the things that I think has really helped unlock stuff with Move Everything is I added this quantized resampler, so you can say record exactly 4 bars, right? So if you think about you're building your track, like you could take something that you think is good and make it a loop and then put that on a drum rack. And suddenly now you have that able to be played back, and you have whatever, 16 pads times 4 tracks of clips and audio that you can do and remix stuff. So yeah, it pushes creativity and pushes workflow in a different way, but I think it still gets you there and still gets you the ability to make music and have fun, which is really what it's about.
So I guess the last question would be, unless there's something that you feel you would like to just point out before I sort of cap it off, in terms of like something you're particularly proud of, or something that you want to pat yourself on the back for, or shout out in terms of something else, just before I ask my question.
Yeah, so I think there's 2 related things. Like I have done a lot of work on this for sure, but I am not the only person who has done this. This is all based on the ability of techniques from the Move Anything project, which is out there. It's all based on porting open source synthesizers and effects, most of them. And other people in the community are now also building new modules and stuff too, which is great to see. I'm happy that I am the one who is talking about it, but I'm also like, I'm not completely responsible for everything that happens. And I just want to be clear that like it's a community, and that's what's so awesome, is that like other people can take stuff and push it forward.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I would definitely say to people is make sure that you do. I'll link to the Discord in the comments, and also to Move Everything as well, so people can check it out for themselves, because there are a lot of people that are involved in it. So that's awesome that you shouted them out. Tell me, what would you say to anyone who is potentially looking in dabbling in music software development, in hacking / altering software, the Move, the Push? What would you say to someone who's considering getting involved with that?
So I think there's 2 things you're talking about. One is like music software, and one is hacking products. I think for hacking products, like it's really about what you can safely have access to and what your own risk tolerance is, right? Like some stuff you can put new firmware on, but you have to solder a bunch of wires to it, and you may literally melt your synthesizer. You may not want to do that. So just your own risk tolerance there. On getting into music software development, like I mentioned, I've been using AI agents for a lot of this code. And I often make the metaphor that it's like having a power saw, right? Like I had a manual saw and I could cut down a tree, and now I have a circular saw and I can make a chair, and I can make any chair that I want and exactly the chair that I want. However, if I actually want a good chair, I still might go to IKEA, because like they've been making chairs for a long time and know what they're doing. But like you still have this ability to like make something that is yours, and it unlocks a lot of power there. So getting started, $20 to Claude can get you your idea maybe out in a way of a prototype that you can see. I do think that you need to have a background and understanding of like how things, like how signal flow works and stuff. And it's more difficult than just saying, please make me an app, and then it makes you an app. But there's this ability now to dig in there and say, I have this idea, I think it should work this way, and then this should happen, and this should happen. And you can really build up these building blocks into something. And the barrier is so low that just try it. Just try it on your computer. For hardware, the one thing I'll say, there's a project called Daisy Seed, which is an open source, it's like a little DSP basically. And you can buy a guitar pedal that it runs in, and you can write your own like guitar pedal effects and stuff. So there's all sorts of stuff out there that you don't even have to hack an existing product. You can buy products that are made for hacking and start writing your own stuff. And some of the effects that are on Move Everything, I wrote first for this guitar pedal, and now that code can live on in a bunch of different places, and it's super fun. Just get started, try it out. This all you're going to do is try it, and like it's very hard to mess anything up when you're working in just the system's asset design.
I love it. I mean, that's the thing, is that like lowering the bar for like, you know, accessibility and allowing sort of more and more people to get started. But I guess what I'm also hearing you say that like, you know, don't give up on mastering something and making sure you're still like continuing to move down that path if you want to improve your skills, I guess.
Yeah. And also like I think if you're looking at getting started, like there's tons of platforms that are open source platforms. Like Zintian is like another, it's like an open source synthesizer, that whole thing. Like those are probably easier ways to get started than trying to figure out how to not just write software, but then get your software to run on something that wasn't designed to run in the first place. So for getting started, just make something in a web browser. There's all kinds of ways to get music out there, and there's no reason to force yourself to try and get started on hard mode.
I love that. Awesome. Charles, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I'm gonna hit you up for another video in 3 months' time when you've basically become the de facto software for Ableton Move, because I'm sure that's gonna happen.
I think there's only like probably a couple hundred people that are running it, and you're one of them. So like I don't have any analytics, so I don't know, but it's cool to see the people that run it that really dig it. But it's also like it's a side project for everybody, and that's fine. That's great.
Awesome, Charles. Thank you so much, and I will definitely chat with you on the Discord at some point.
Awesome. Have a great day. See you later.
You too. Thanks. Bye.